The dust storm came without warning, turning the Wyoming plains into a chaos of red and wind that made visibility impossible. Sarah Mitchell had been riding for 3 days straight, escaping the suffocating sympathy of Redemption Falls, where she spent the last 18 months as a widow, not as a person, but as a cautionary tale. Her husband had died in a mining accident, leaving her with nothing but debts, a tarnished reputation, and the crushing weight of expectations that a proper widow should remain mourning forever. But Sarah was tired of mourning. She was tired of being expected to become invisible, to fade into the background of other people's lives, to accept that her own life had ended the day her husband stopped breathing. She was riding toward Denver when the storm hit, and that's when she saw the cabin. It appeared through the dust like a mirage, a structure of solid with that promised shelter from the chaos. Sarah didn't hesitate. She dismounted, led her horse to the lean-to attached to the back, and pushed through the cabin door just as the wind threatened to rip it from its hinges. Inside, a man was sitting by the fire. He was perhaps 40, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades in the sun. His left arm was in a sling, and there were fresh bandages visible beneath his open shirt. He looked at her with the kind of wariness reserved for strangers appearing suddenly out of dust storms. "Rough timing," he said, his voice low and steady. "Storm will last hours, maybe through the night. I'm Jake Coulter. You're welcome to shelter here, but I need to warn you straight. There's only one bed in this cabin. It's mine. You're welcome to it. I'll take the chair by the fire. But I need you to understand the limitations of what I can offer." Sarah understood what he wasn't saying. He was warning her that they would be alone, that propriety would be challenged, that her reputation, already questionable for traveling alone, would be destroyed if anyone discovered she'd spent the night at a stranger's cabin. She also understood that she no longer cared. "I'm Sarah," she said, moving closer to the fire. "Sarah Mitchell. And I'm grateful for the shelter, Mr. Coulter. The bed is yours. I'll take the chair." Jake's eyes registered surprise at her lack of protest, her straightforward acceptance. "You're a widow," he said. It wasn't a question. The black dress, the hollow look, the way she carried herself with the weight of loss. "I am," Sarah confirmed. "Then you understand what people will say if this gets out." "Yes," Sarah said. "And I don't care anymore." Jake prepared food, beans, hardtack, strong coffee, and they ate in comfortable silence. Sarah found herself studying him. The careful way he moved his injured arm, the scars on his knuckles, the intelligence in his dark eyes. He was a man who'd lived hard and learned from it. "How did you injure your arm?" Sarah asked. "Broke it 3 weeks ago." Jake said. "Fell from a horse. Stupid mistake. I've been healing out here, away from town, away from people who want to help but don't really understand." "Running away," Sarah said softly. Jake met her eyes. "Yes. Are you?" Sarah considered the question with the honesty it deserved. "Yes," she said finally. "I'm running from expectations, from the idea that I should grieve quietly, stay invisible, accept that my life is over because my husband's ended. I'm running from a town that wants me to be a symbol of tragedy instead of a person who's still alive." Jake nodded slowly. 18 months, he said. "That's how long you've been a widow?" "How did you know?" "Because that's the point where grief starts to feel like a choice," Jake said. "When you're expected to live forever in that dress, in that role. When people stop seeing Sarah and only see the widow." They talked through the night, the storm raging outside while inside the cabin, 2 broken people found something approaching understanding. Jake told her about the life he'd lived, riding rough country, working cattle, learning to survive alone. Sarah told him about her marriage. A good man who'd loved her but had never really seen her, never asked what she wanted, never considered that she might want more than children and a quiet home. "What do you want?" Jake asked as the fire burned low. Sarah was quiet for a long time. "I want to feel alive again," she said finally. "I want to do things that scare me. I want to make choices that aren't safe. I want to know what it feels like to be wanted, not as a wife, not as a mother, not as anything defined by what a man needs me to be. Just wanted. For myself." Jake's breath seemed to catch. He rose slowly and moved to the window, looking out at the storm that showed no signs of breaking. "You're dangerous," he said quietly. Why? Sarah asked. Because you're admitting things women aren't supposed to admit. Because you're standing in my cabin, a stranger, and you're not pretending to be ashamed of that. Because you're making me want things I've spent years learning not to want. Sarah stood and moved toward him. Then want them, she said. I'm tired of everyone pretending. I'm tired of propriety mattering more than honesty. I'm tired of being invisible. What happened between them that night wasn't delicate or refined. It was passionate and urgent and absolutely real. Jake, despite his protests, despite his concern for her reputation, found himself unable to deny either of them what they both desperately needed. They made love on that bed with the storm howling outside, and for the first time since her husband's death, Sarah felt truly alive. Morning came slowly, sunlight filtering through windows that revealed a world washed clean by the storm. Sarah woke in Jake's arms, and instead of regret, she felt peace. She'd crossed a line that society said she couldn't uncross. She'd done the thing that would destroy her reputation irrevocably, and she'd never felt more like herself. Stay, Jake said, his voice rough with sleep. Not just a day. Stay. Build a life here with me. Sarah turned to face him. People will talk. They'll say I'm immoral, desperate, damaged. They'll use words that would make your grandmother blush. Let them, Jake said. I've spent 40 years not giving a damn what people think, and I've learned it's the most honest way to live. I'm not asking you to do this for me, Sarah. I'm asking you to do this for yourself. I'm asking you to prove that a woman's life doesn't end when her husband dies. I'm asking you to live. I'll need to go back to Redemption Falls, Sarah said, to settle affairs, to face them, to tell them the truth. Then we'll go together. They rode into Redemption Falls 2 weeks later, and the effect was immediate and catastrophic. Sarah Mitchell, the respectable widow in her black dress, rode beside a rugged stranger with her hair loose around her shoulders and a diamond ring on her hand. The town erupted into scandal. Women whispered behind their fans. Men looked at Jake with a mixture of envy and judgment. The preacher was brought in to assess the moral catastrophe. Sarah called a town meeting in the saloon, a place no proper woman had entered in Redemption Falls history. She stood before them, and she spoke truth. My name is Sarah Mitchell, she said, her voice steady. I was married to a good man who died 18 months ago, and for the past year and a half, I've been expected to grieve quietly, to accept that my life was over, to fade into the background of this town as a symbol of tragedy and loss. But I'm done with that. I'm a woman, not a symbol. I have desires, dreams, and the right to live them. I met Jake Coulter during a storm, and I fell in love with him, not because I was desperate, not because I was damaged, but because he saw me. He saw Sarah, not the widow, and I chose him. The saloon erupted. Some people walked out in disgust. Some sat stunned, and some, the women especially, looked at her with something that might have been recognition. You're ruined, the preacher said. No respectable man will have you now. Good, Sarah said, because I didn't become myself to be respectable. I became myself to be alive. Jake stood and took her hand. We're leaving Redemption Falls, he said. We're going to build a ranch north of here, away from people who measure a woman's worth by her conformity. And anyone who wants to know us will have to understand that we chose each other not because society approved, but because we couldn't live without it. 5 years later, the ranch was thriving. Sarah had become known throughout the territory as a woman who broke every rule and thrived because of it. She raised horses, managed cattle, and spoke her mind without apology. She had 3 children with Jake, born of genuine passion and partnership, and she'd never looked back at the woman she'd been in black. One day, a delegation rode out to the ranch. Women from Redemption Falls. Women who'd watched Sarah's transformation and wondered if they too could choose differently. Sarah welcomed them with open arms and taught them what she'd learned, that a woman's life doesn't end when tragedy touches it, that becoming yourself requires courage, sacrifice, and a willingness to be called names by people whose opinions shouldn't matter, that sometimes the most radical act is simply to admit what you want and pursue it unapologetically. Jake watched from the porch, and he understood that bringing Sarah into his cabin that day had been the best decision of his life. She'd come in running from one life and emerged into another, one she'd chosen entirely for herself. That evening, sitting by their own fire now, Sarah leaned against Jake and said something she'd been thinking for years. "Thank you for warning me about the bed." Jake laughed. "Best warning I ever gave that nobody listened to." "I listened," Sarah said. "I just didn't care. Because I'd spent so long being what everyone needed me to be that I didn't know how to be what I needed. You gave me permission to stop asking for approval." "No," Jake said. "You gave yourself permission. I just stood beside you while you claimed it." The frontier town of Redemption Falls would spend years discussing the scandal of Sarah Mitchell, the widow who'd run away with a stranger and somehow become the most fulfilled woman any of them knew. They would struggle to understand how breaking all the rules had led to genuine happiness, how being called immoral had freed her to be authentic. But Sarah understood the paradox perfectly, that sometimes the most shocking thing a woman can do is refuse to apologize for living, and that sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about finding someone to save you. They're about finding someone who stands beside you while you save yourself.